The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly as Sarah Martinez stepped into the gleaming lobby of Boston Animal Medical Center. Her hand gripped the worn leash of the German Shepherd beside her, a dog who moved with a cautious, limping grace, his missing hind leg, giving his gait a quiet rhythm of resilience. Max didn't flinch at the glares from pristine pet owners or the judgmental stares of the reception staff. He just stayed close to Sarah's side, eyes calm amber and tired. Martinez back with the tripod again. Megan Riley's voice sliced through the quiet laced with a sneer. Behind the glossy reception desk, her manicured fingers clicked across the keyboard with performative boredom. Dr. Preston's running behind with the Vanderbilt's Pomeranian. You know how it is paying customers first. Sarah gave a polite nod. We'll wait. Max is patient. She led him to the far corner away from the uncomfortable eyes. Max laid down with deliberate slowness, resting his scarred body on the cold tile. Though people whispered, though a woman in designer heels murmured about dangerous rescues, Sarah didn't respond. Max had heard worse, endured worse. 3 years ago, he'd been pulled from a fighting ring, beaten, starved, left with wounds that never fully healed, and a leg too mangled to save. Yet he was calm now, calm in the storm of cruelty that masqueraded as care. After nearly an hour of waiting, a tech mercifully, not Kyle, led them to exam room 3. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she helped Max onto the table. His eyes found hers and held them. There was trust there, old and hard-earned. The door opened. Dr. Victoria Preston entered without looking up from her tablet. Hair in a tight bun, coat spotless, her voice flat. Rescue dog, 3-year-old German Shepherd, amputation, history of trauma. She didn't bother to greet Sarah. Instead, she gave Max the briefest of touches, prodding him with all the warmth of cold metal. Physical therapist is with an emergency. Kyle will handle the session. Sarah's heart sank. As if summoned, Kyle Thompson filled the doorway. Muscular, smirking. The mutt again. Sarah swallowed. I'll get his med records from the car. Just a moment. Take your time. Preston smiled falsely. We'll get acquainted with your special boy. Max trembled the moment the door shut behind Sarah. As soon as Sarah's footsteps faded, the air shifted. Max pressed his body flat against the exam table, eyes darting toward the corner. Kyle raised his phone, already recording. Look at this thing. Missing a leg covered in scars, and people still throw money at it like it's a champion. Dr. Preston chuckled dryly. Damaged goods taking up space. That slot could have gone to the Morgan's Weimaraner puppy. Megan appeared in the doorway, drawn like a vulture to carnage. Is this the mutt Sarah treats like royalty? The one she thinks deserves the same care as a pedigree. No one noticed Max's ears flatten. He didn't growl. He didn't move. He simply endured, still as stone. The learned stillness of a creature who had survived far worse. Kyle's eyes gleamed. You know what would make this video go viral? His gaze flicked to the half-finished can of Coca-Cola on Preston's desk. There was a pause. Then slowly, with a predator's grin, Dr. Preston picked it up. You're right. He does look thirsty. Max didn't flinch as the cold syrup splashed down over his head, soaking into the rough fur, stinging the old wounds. His breath came in short, shuddering pants. The soda dripped from his chin to the floor. Kyle kept recording. Megan typed rapidly on her phone. And then the door opened. Sarah stood in the doorway, her eyes locking onto the scene, Preston holding the empty can, Kyle filming Max, soaked and shivering. Silence stretched. What have you done? Sarah's voice was low, sharp as glass, not furious, worse, controlled. Preston turned, casually reaching for a paper towel. Little accident. He startled me. No harm done, Megan chimed in. Sarah knelt beside Max, ignoring them. She whispered to him, running her fingers along his soaked fur. He didn't move, but his eyes followed her every gesture, like she was the last lifeboat in a storm. When she rose, her face was calm. Her fingers moved swiftly on her phone. "You've made a mistake," she said. Kyle snorted. "Oh yeah. What, gonna call animal control?" "No," Sarah replied, glancing at her watch. "I texted someone. 15 minutes. That's all it will take." Megan laughed mockingly. "What happens then?" "The dog turns into a prince." Sarah didn't smile. She simply said, "You just poured soda on the most important patient this clinic has ever seen. Then Mr. Hartman is on his way." And that changed everything. The room stiffened. A name had been spoken, not whispered, not hinted, but declared. "Mr. Hartman." Dr. Preston's expression faltered. "Hartman." "Not that Hartman?" she asked, voice no longer steady. Sarah's eyes didn't blink. "Yes, that Hartman." The silence thickened. Kyle's fingers hovered above his phone, but he didn't press record this time. Megan lowered hers altogether. 14 minutes, Sarah said, simply crouching again beside Max. She retrieved a packet of sterile wipes and began gently blotting away the syrupy mess from his coat. The German shepherd leaned into her touch, his trembling slowing just slightly. Kyle's smirk was gone. "She's bluffing," he mumbled, but his voice had lost its smug edge. "Why would a billionaire own a mangled mutt?" Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she cleaned Max's ears, dried his shoulders, and whispered things that only he could hear. Her calmness gnawed at the others like guilt rising through the floorboards. 13 minutes, she murmured. Dr. Preston yanked the tablet off the counter and scrolled furiously. Her face paled as she reached Max's patient file. "These treatment protocols, these are custom specialty therapies, weekly blood work. Mr. Hartman is particular," Sarah replied without looking up. "And he expects excellence. That's why he chose this clinic. Or used to." "Get this room sanitized," Preston snapped. "Kyle, clean the dog. Megan, call maintenance. Everything needs to be perfect." Sarah looked up finally. "It won't be." Kyle hesitated. "Come on, Sarah. We were just joking." She pointed at his phone. "You filmed it. You poured soda on a disabled dog while mocking him. That's not a joke. That's evidence." Kyle's hand trembled as he fumbled with the phone. "I deleted it." Sarah's lips tightened. "Don't worry. It can be recovered." Megan stepped back toward the door. "What is he going to do, fire us? Just because the dog belongs to someone rich?" Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Outside the window, a sleek black Tesla slid into the front parking space. Dr. Preston leaned forward to get a better look. Her jaw tensed. 1 minute, Sarah said, folding the used wipes neatly and placing them in the waste bin. She stood slowly. "You'll want to have your apologies ready." The click of expensive shoes echoed in the hall. Footsteps, steady, approaching. The door swung open. William Hartman didn't just enter, he arrived. The room shrank around his presence, 6'3", in a tailored charcoal suit, every movement sharp with purpose. His steel-gray eyes swept across the space in a single cutting glance. The attorneys flanking him stood silent. 2 security guards lingered just outside. Will said nothing at first. Instead, he crossed the room and knelt beside Max. The transformation was instant. The trembling dog rose with effort and leaned into his owner's chest tail, wagging wildly, a broken machine surging back to life. Max licked Will's face with unrestrained joy, his body quivering, not from fear, but relief. Will wrapped an arm around him, heedless of his expensive clothes. "It's okay, boy. I'm here now." Only then did he speak, his voice soft but razor-edged. "What happened?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "They poured soda on him, sir. For fun. While filming." Will stood slowly, hand still, resting gently on Max's head. He turned to face Dr. Preston. Is that true? Preston tried to smile. There was an accident. A misunderstanding. I asked Will, interrupted if it's true. The room froze. Yes, she whispered. Kyle took a step forward. Sir, show me the video. I deleted it, Kyle said quickly, eyes wide. It was a mistake. I know that now. One of Will's attorneys stepped forward. Deleting evidence is obstruction. We'll recover the file from your phone. It's company property now. Megan's face drained of color. Mr. Hartman, Will ignored her. You all knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't know who Max belonged to. And that is the problem. Dr. Preston's voice cracked. We didn't realize had I known. Will's tone turned colder. So, if he belonged to someone less important, this would have been acceptable. Silence. He took a breath, calm returning like winter frost. I'm the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Medical Group. This clinic operates under my investment umbrella. Every employee contract here gives me full investigative access. Dr. Preston staggered. But Pinnacle's owned by Hartman Ventures, Will said flatly, another holding of mine. Sarah stood quietly, Max now seated beside her, his amber eyes fixed on Will with absolute trust. Will looked at them both, then back at the trembling staff. You poured Coca-Cola on the wrong dog, and now the reckoning would begin. Will didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of his words settled into every corner of the room, like a final verdict. For months, he said, Sarah has documented every insult, every delay in care, every time this clinic prioritized pedigree over pain. Dr. Preston tried to regain footing. Mr. Hartman, I assure you this was an isolated. Will cut her off. You assure me nothing. His gaze never wavered. You didn't treat Max like a patient. You treated him like trash because he didn't come with a pedigree certificate or an owner in a designer coat. Kyle stood frozen mouth half open. Megan looked down at her shoes. Will's female attorney stepped forward, unfolding a thick folder. We have employee messages mocking rescue animals. Billing fraud where rescues were overcharged for inferior care. Video clips. Witness statements. Sarah stayed silent, hands resting on Max's back. The dog pressed into her, grounded by her presence. You've humiliated patients, Will continued. And now you'll be held accountable. Kyle blurted out, I have student loans. I can't lose this job. You should have thought of that, Will said before using a disabled animal for entertainment. Dr. Preston's voice was nearly inaudible. This place was built on prestige, on wealthy clients. Will stepped closer. And it was meant to be built on compassion. I chose this hospital for Max because I believed in your reputation. Now I see it was a facade. Preston's face crumbled. Why are you doing this? It's just a dog. Will froze. Then he turned slowly toward her. Max, he said, is the reason I'm still alive. The room hushed. Even the ticking wall clock seemed to pause. Will's voice was quieter now, but it cut deeper. 3 years ago, I lost my wife and daughter in a boating accident. I walked into a shelter and saw a dog with the same hollow eyes I saw in the mirror. Will's words hovered in the air like a weight no one could lift. I postponed my plans. He continued, eyes distant. Just one day, to make sure Max got care. Then another day. Then another. I watched him fight to heal, despite everything humans did to him. And slowly he reminded me how to live. No one dared speak. Max rested quietly at Sarah's feet, as if he understood the truth in every word. Will straightened. So no, Dr. Preston. He is not just a dog. He is the reason I'm still standing here. And you mocked him, abused him, disrespected the very values this place was supposed to represent. Megan choked back a sob. Kyle's hands shook. You are all terminated, Will said calmly. Effective immediately. Dr. Preston drew herself up one last time. You can't do this. I'll sue. Please do. Will replied with a sharp smile. I look forward to the media covering your defense. Let's see how Boston reacts when its most prestigious animal clinic becomes a cautionary tale. Dr. Preston's resolve cracked. Her shoulders slumped, as if the past 20 years of her career collapsed all at once. I didn't know, she whispered. Will's expression was stone. You shouldn't have needed to know. You took an oath to care to heal. But your kindness had conditions. Security arrived silently. Escort them out, Will instructed. Kyle didn't argue. Megan barely held back tears as she was led away. Dr. Preston, once so composed, now walked with the heavy steps of someone already judged. Sarah watched them go, hand resting on Max's back. Dr. Anderson, the hospital's founder, arrived just as the door closed behind the disgraced trio. His face aged, and Graves searched Will's. Is it true? He asked. Will handed him the folder. It's all there. We have enough evidence to rebuild this place or burn it down. Dr. Anderson looked at Max. We'll rebuild, he said quietly. But this time, the right way. Max looked up at the man, then back at Will, and gave a soft wag of his tail. The conference room was packed wall to wall. Veterinarians, nurses, receptionists. Everyone not treating a critical patient had been summoned. Rumors had already reached every corner of the clinic. The firing of Dr. Preston, Kyle, and Megan wasn't just news. It was a quake. Max lay at Sarah's feet, freshly cleaned and brushed. The scars across his side still showed, but his posture was relaxed, serene. The center of gravity in the room. Dr. Anderson stepped up to the podium first. His voice was low but unwavering. This institution was built on a single promise that all animals, regardless of breed, cost, or condition, deserve the best possible care. He paused. That promise was broken. Gasps rippled. People fidgeted in their seats. An incident occurred today, he continued, that forced us to face what many of you already suspected. A rescue dog, one who had endured unthinkable cruelty, was deliberately mistreated within these walls. Not because of medical necessity, but because of perceived value. He looked down. That dog belongs to William Hartman. Whispers burst like fireworks. Will stood and stepped into the space beside the podium. Instantly, the room hushed again. His voice was calm, but carried like steel. Some of you may know me. Most don't. That's by design. I prefer to act in silence. But today, I need you to see the truth. He motioned toward Max. This is Max. 3 years ago, he was rescued from a dog-fighting ring. Starved, beaten, leg destroyed, scheduled for euthanasia. A few heads bowed. I had lost everything. My wife, my daughter. I went to that shelter to make one last donation before I left the world behind. His voice caught for a beat. But Max looked at me, not with fear, not with hate, with something else. Something that said you and I both survived something we weren't supposed to. I postponed my plans. One day, then another. Will continued, his voice quieter now, but laced with unmistakable emotion. I made sure Max got treated, and somehow in helping him heal, he helped me survive. The staff sat motionless. Some blinked away tears. Others looked at Max like they were seeing him for the first time. Not a rescue, but a revelation. For 3 years, Will said, he's been more than a dog. He's been my shadow, my compass, my reason to get out of bed. Sarah looked down. Max's head rested gently against her shoe, his ears perked. He's visited children's hospitals, sat beside grieving families, never growled, never snapped. Despite everything humans have done to him, he still trusts. He looked around the room, eyes sharp. And that trust was violated today, not just by a single act, but by a culture that allowed cruelty to be masked as protocol. The lights dimmed slightly as a projector lit up the back wall. Sarah stood and took over. On screen charts, records messages. I documented 47 cases in the last 6 months, she said, voice steady. Instances where rescue animals received delayed or substandard care. Wait times were triple, medications downgraded, bills inflated. Comments like damaged goods and not worth the meds were common. Screenshots flashed. Staffers winced. Some covered their mouths. This wasn't an accident, Will said. It was policy unwritten, but enforced through silence. The weight of it hit like a wave. Sarah returned to her seat, but not before giving Max one soft pat. Will let the silence breathe, then spoke again. I came here today prepared to announce a $100 million donation, a new rehabilitation wing, specialized care, training, the most advanced rescue recovery center in the country. The room inhaled. That donation, he said, is on hold. Gasps, audible despair, but not lost. He added, its release depends on what happens next. If this place can return to its founding mission, I'll be the first to fund it. He looked directly at Dr. Anderson. Starting today, everything changes. Dr. Anderson stepped forward again, his voice grave. Effective immediately, all patient prioritization will be based solely on medical necessity, not the owner's net worth. There was no applause, just silence and something deeper, a collective reckoning. A new oversight committee will review every case, he continued. Billing practices will be audited. Transparency will be the new norm. Whispers rippled through the crowd, some in fear, some in relief. Will spoke once more. This is not about punishment. It's about integrity. Those who enabled this culture will be held accountable, but those who stood against it quietly or openly will help rebuild it. He turned toward Sarah. Sarah Martinez will be promoted to Director of Rehabilitation Services. Gasps again, but this time warm. Surprised. Sarah blinked, stunned. She's the reason I know the truth, Will continued. She treated Max not like a burden, but a being. She risked her job for his dignity. Max, sensing the shift, lifted his head proudly, as if aware he too had helped change something far larger than himself. Dr. Anderson nodded. I'll resume as interim chief vet until we find someone aligned with our values. All staff will undergo mandatory ethics and rescue training starting tomorrow. No one spoke. Then Jennifer, a veterinary nurse in the front row, raised her hand. Mr. Hartman, some of us tried, quietly, but we were told. That's just how it worked. That premium clients came first. Will met her eyes. And those who resisted that logic, quietly or not, will not be forgotten. This isn't a purge. It's a reset. He paused, then looked down at Max, who had laid his head on his paws once more, calm in the storm. Max didn't just survive cruelty, Will said. He forgave it. And that's what we're being asked to do now, if not for each other, then for the animals who have no voice. The meeting concluded quietly. No one rushed for the doors. People sat still, some blinking through tears, others simply stunned by the gravity of what had unraveled and what was now being rebuilt. As staff slowly began to file out, many paused to glance at Max, not with pity, but with reverence. His scars no longer spoke of damage. They testified to resilience. Back in the conference room, Will, Sarah, and Dr. Anderson sat with the legal team outlining next steps. Max lay beneath the table, breathing evenly. Dr. Anderson turned to Will. Will the donation still be possible? Will leaned back, thinking. The funds are ready, but they'll be released in phases. I want to see this change not just announced, but lived. Sarah added. There are rescues scheduled next week who've waited months for basic care. They become our priority, Will said without hesitation. Use whatever's needed. Match the standard given to any wealthy client. And if anyone pushes back, send them to me. His phone buzzed. A call. He looked down and frowned. Vanessa Whitfield, chairwoman of the state veterinary board, and Victoria Preston's sister-in-law. Sarah glanced over. "Are you going to answer?" Will slipped the phone into his jacket. "Not yet. Not until our evidence is bulletproof." Preston's power protected her for too long. Dr. Anderson's brows knit. The board could resist these reforms. Will gave a quiet smile. "Let them try. I didn't build a tech empire by running from fights." He looked at Max, who was now watching him, ears up steady. "And I've got the best compass I've ever had." Sarah smiled faintly. Will stood, straightening his tie. "Take Max home," he told Sarah gently. "He's had enough for one day." She rose, clipped on his leash. The shepherd stood smoothly, his three-legged stance, practiced, confident. Before turning to go, Sarah hesitated. "Was it true," she asked softly, "that he saved your life?" Will's eyes lingered on Max. Every word. Then he knelt and pressed a kiss to Max's head. Sometimes, he said, the reason to live is simply the one who never stopped believing you could. Victoria Preston sat alone in her parked car, staring blankly through the windshield as dusk fell over the Boston skyline. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, white-knuckled. Everything, the power, the prestige, the career she'd spent 2 decades building, was gone, all because of a dog. Not just any dog. A 3-legged, battle-scarred German shepherd who hadn't even growled as she drenched him in soda. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't answer. Her brother-in-law, the board chair, had called 3 times. She couldn't face him. Couldn't explain how she'd turned Boston's most respected animal hospital into a fortress of cruelty. How she'd reduced the worth of a patient to the pedigree of its owner. And now it was crumbling. The media would come next. The board. The lawsuits. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and saw Max's face. Not angry, not wild, just still. Resigned. As if her cruelty had only confirmed what he already believed about the world. That image would haunt her longer than any disciplinary hearing ever could. Across town, Kyle sat hunched in a bar, whiskey in hand, scrolling through an empty phone. His veterinary license would be reviewed. Clinics wouldn't touch him now. His 50,000-follower Instagram account had gone private after the backlash hit like a flood. He'd joked, mocked, filmed it all. And for what? To belong, to impress Preston. He rubbed his face. The bartender slid another drink toward him without asking. "You look like a guy who learned something the hard way," the bartender said. Kyle didn't answer, because it was true. Back in her apartment, Megan Riley sat on the floor, surrounded by tissues and silence. Her roommate had stopped trying to console her hours ago. The hate messages hadn't stopped. Neither had the rejection emails. But worst of all was the call from her mother. "How could you be so cruel?" she'd asked. "That's not how we raised you." Megan had no defense, only regret. She stared at her phone, expecting more scorn. Instead, a new message appeared. Unknown number. It was a photo. Max sitting in a children's cancer ward. A small bald girl, arms wrapped around his thick neck, face buried in his fur. The caption, "The dog you mocked today." Her name is Emma. She hadn't spoken since her diagnosis until she met him. Megan's sobs came quietly at first, then all at once. Meanwhile, back at Hartman's estate, Max lay sprawled across a plush rug beside the fireplace. Clean, safe home. Will sat on the floor next to him, suit jacket, off sleeves rolled. Max's head rested in his lap, eyes half closed, tail thumping now and then, with lazy affection. Sarah stepped in from the kitchen holding a mug. "He's had dinner, and his meds." Will nodded. "And I've had perspective." She smiled softly. "Tomorrow's going to be hard," she said. Will looked down at Max. "It always is. But now we have something worth fighting for." Sarah walked to the door, pausing. Was it really just one look that changed everything? Will's voice was quiet. It wasn't just a look. It was recognition. He saw I was broken, and he didn't flinch. Outside, the night was still. But inside, in the warmth of firelight and quiet breath, a man and a dog, both survivors, found peace in each other's presence.